What's the difference between working for being a software guy at a hardware versus being a software guy in a software company?
It's very different. I mean, I think there's at least a couple of shifts. One is a shift of industries, obviously. Although an adjacent industry, I kind of think of what we were doing at Microsoft and what we do at Juniper in the networking space as being adjacent to each other. It's still a different industry, but it is very different working in what's fundamentally a hardware company, in a hardware industry, and that's one of the most interesting parts of my job and one of the bigger challenges, which is helping to transform the company to also be a software company, which I think we need to do, and I think the whole industry needs to do.
When you become software only, you commoditize the hardware.
Right.
It's still being a company that makes a certain amount of its revenues, bulk of them, on hardware. Right. How do you balance those needs?
Well, I think the thing is if you look and say what parts of what is likely to be commoditized, and certainly anything that's got an x86 in it, that is x86 based, is effectively a commoditized piece of hardware, right? If your fundamental value is to provide x86 computing, that is a commoditized piece of hardware. That's not what we generally build. I mean, almost all of our revenue comes from routers and other devices that have special purpose ASICs in them, largely that we've designed and built. So if you look at all of our routers, they have our own special purpose ASICs. If you look at security, we have special ASICs in there. Even the switches, in some cases we do, although we do use a lot of merchant silicon in our switching infrastructure. If you think about the following, which is anything can be done in an x86, right? It's a general purpose computer. So any network function can be done in software.
Right.
The question is, can it be done at the level of performance that's required for the application set?
Right.
And in some cases, the answer is yes. I mean, if you're only trying to push a gig or two of throughput through, you can actually do that in software today in a modern x86 server. If you're trying to push hundreds of gig through, the answer is no, it can't be.
Right.
And it has to be done in special purpose hardware, which is why routers will continue to have that, and which is why we think that will not be a commoditized business anytime soon. Switches, as a general rule, are commoditized. I mean, we've seen a trend towards commoditization of switches over a number of years. They still command higher margins in general than an x86 server does, but they are commoditized relative to like a router.
Got it. What is the key task? Is it just enabling applications to run on the network, or the other way around, making sure the network is good for applications, or somewhere in between?
I think the first task is understanding what business problems the customers want to have solved that software is more appropriate to solve than network systems are. And SDN has been incredibly helpful in that, because I serendipitously, and honestly it was totally serendipitous, because it's not like I said, there's a huge trend in networking and software, therefore I'll go join the networking industry. That maybe I should have been smart enough to say that's what happened, but it isn't. But when I joined Juniper was relatively coincident to the growing trend towards SDN across the overall industry. So there's a recognition at the industry level that the networking devices and the way networking has been traditionally performed is not satisfying the full set of needs of businesses, both enterprises and service providers going forward. In the case of enterprises, the fundamental issue is that as they move to private clouds, they need a dynamic capability in their infrastructure, which the network isn't providing, and the industry is looking to SDN for that. The other big thing we see is that in the service provider space, they see a need to be able to provide new network services to their customers in a much more timely way than they're able to do today. They watch as Facebook and Google and others have been able to build services at a very rapid rate that runs over the top on their networks. And while I don't think that any service provider is going to build Facebook anytime soon, there's a whole set of services that their customers would like to have, which service providers are well structured to do, but which they're limited in their ability to deliver because of the fact that software is encapsulated in boxes. So what my first job, with Juniper, my first job really was to say, okay, in the goal of understanding how we create a software business and deliver software value to customers, is there a coherent platform, a coherent architecture that we can build upon that will actually satisfy the needs across a wide variety of different customers? When I joined Juniper, there was no such thing. There was a whole set of different business approaches in software, which by and large were unrelated to each other. And my first 8 months at the company was about going, this doesn't make sense. we can't build a software business this way. We need to take it in a different way. And in particular, what we need is to understand how we have a common architecture that we build upon to create a broad set of software offerings and services. I come from, this is part of my 20 plus years at Microsoft.
Sure.
You build a common platform and then you create the applications on top of the platform. And I was seeking a similar sort of structure.
All those things, Junos is the base operating systems,
Right.
Pulse and Space. So there kind of was, in the pre-SDN era, before people use it as a word, there already was that direction from the technical leadership at Juniper. So
well, there was, but then, when you looked, first of all, there was this idea that Junos is a very broad-based operating system, which it is certainly true, and it's used across our systems. When we looked at our software businesses and the software things we were pursuing, a lot of those were not truly Junos-based. They were sort of going in different sets of directions, in some cases based on acquisitions that we had done.
Yeah.
The thing that, one of the architectural changes and realizations that we've come to at Juniper is that Junos is a great operating system for our systems, and it's an important part of our systems products, and it'll always be part of the systems we sell. But as we think more broadly and want to provide service capabilities and SDN capabilities outside the box, Junos is not appropriate for that. It really is a network system operating system. It is an embedded operating system for Juniper networking hardware. Mm-hmm. And when we move to deliver the capabilities that I talked about today, service chaining, our SDN controller, the set of services we're building on that, by and large, those capabilities, while branded Junos is our software brand now, right? They actually are Linux-based.
Yeah.
So we, almost all the work that my team is doing on delivering software outside of our systems is done with Linux underneath it.
Others, not me, like to poke fun at QFabric as being an attempt, perhaps. Yeah. Where do you see that fitting in as a SDN piece? And I know that's hardware, not software.
Well, yeah, I think that you can look at QFabric. What QFabric does very well is it provides a single management. It manages a large number of ports as a single switch. That's effectively the one of the biggest advantages it does. It also provides low latency and a set of other things. It's a great underlay. The way to think about it from the SDN perspective is that it provides a great layer 2, layer 3 underlay physical network and it's one of the many choices that you have for building an SDN architecture. But we would still put the Contrail controller and the overlay architecture going on top of QFabric. And QFabric provides effectively what looks like effectively a single switch to manage. With the work that we're doing with Network Director, we're also taking significant steps with Junos Space to take a set of EX or QFX switches that are hooked together in a more traditional two-tier architecture and allowing those to be managed, more virtually as a single switch. Our goal with being part of Open Daylight is really to have, to stay part of the open source process as something emerges that could be of interest. We've been very clear that the strategy of what we're pursuing and most of our energy is going into our controller, which is Contrail. We are contributing technology to to Open Daylight, and we're contributing to OpenStack as well, but to Open Daylight we're contributing technology. In particular, our first contribution that we proposed is the source code for the XMPP protocol and the data model for the protocol. So we are contributing in that space. We were Platinum member there. We're watching it more than anything else right now. We don't have plans to actually productize that at the moment, but we're sure looking at it. And we'll see over time. It is really, really early with Open Daylight, and there's still a large amount of conversations that are happening within the Open Daylight community on how the architecture should evolve.